Joe Goldberg has to be the smartest villain of all time, or the detectives in the U-Universe just sucks. How did it take them 5 seasons to catch him? For 4 seasons, he slipped through the fingers of the police and even his friends. Today though, I am going to be putting him up against some of the best detectives across cinema. This video will be me ranking detectives on whether they could catch Joe. I would rank this video using 5 tiers. The first tier is he will be behind bars in season 1. These are the best of the best. These detectives would catch Joe and have him in an orange jumpsuit very quickly. The next tier will catch him eventually. These detectives might not catch Joe overnight, but give them time and they will uncover his secrets. Just going down, just not as quickly. The third tier will get close, but he would slip away. The fourth tier will be suspicious, but never prove it. These detectives will know that something is off about Joe. They might even find a clue or two, but in the end, they won't be able to catch Joe. The final tier will end up in his cage. Now let's get into the video, starting with the greatest detective of all time, Batman. If Joe ever crossed paths with Batman, it would be a very short crossover episode. Batman has dealt with killers like Victor Zsasz and Professor Pig, who are way worse than Joe, and we know that Batman has no patience for murderers. Batman would beat his ass so bad he would beg to be arrested. You can't tell me that Batman won't be able to track Joe buying materials to build an industrial glass cage in his basement, or all the aliases he used from New York to Los Angeles. In true Batman fashion, he might confront Joe in a dark room, growling, "I know what you did," before Joe can even stammer out, Who are you?" He's gonna get a 1-2, Batman is feared by all of Gotham's criminals. To be a serious criminal in Gotham, you gotta have a mental issue. Batman will be Joe's ultimate nightmare. 1 minute, Joe is narrating in his head, talking about, "You think you figured me out, Bruce, but you haven't." And the next minute, he's blinking through the pain of a dislocated shoulder as Batman says under his breath, "I already have." Joe will be in Arkham Asylum so fast, you would think season 1 of You had only 5 episodes. Next will be the iconic detective of Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes. He is famous for his razor-sharp observation and deductive reasoning. Joe's pattern of obsessive stalking and sloppy cover-ups would be child's play for Sherlock. Sherlock would likely zero in on Joe early. He will quickly notice the trail of curious incidents that surrounds Joe. Most of the time, Joe relies on luck, and the only way he can escape Sherlock is with serious plot armor. Sherlock will realize that Joe is a killer pretty early on. Beck's novels alone are enough for him to catch him. Before the end of season 1, Joe would be behind bars, and Joe's gaslighting and charm wouldn't even fool Sherlock for a second. Sherlock's track record also speaks for itself, so against a less formidable and careless person like Joe, it will be easy victory. After all, Sherlock has outsmarted criminal masterminds like Moriarty, a lovesick bookstore manager with little to no impulse control wouldn't even pose a challenge, so Sherlock Holmes will be in tier 1. Up next will be the man himself, Raymond Reddington. Red is not your typical detective. If you were after Joe, there is no way Joe would escape. Red is cunning and is always 3 steps ahead of everyone around him. And unlike most detectives, Red doesn't play by the rules. Red would approach the Joe Goldberg case like a cat playing with an interesting mouse. Joe is used to stalking his prey, but Red would be the one doing the stalking. He would dig into Joe's past aliases and crimes using his vast underworld contacts. Remember, Red makes it his business to know everything. Give Red enough time and he would figure out Joe's pattern. The girlfriends who vanish, the rivals who end up dead, and the convenient new identities. Once Red smells blood, it's game on. The only reason I won't put Raymond Reddington in tier 1 is that he has a flair for dramatics and will take his time toying with Joe. The only other obstacle might be if Joe, by some miracle, realized who he's up against and tried to go on the offensive. Red does have a few personal vulnerabilities, for example his love for his daughter figure Liz Skin, and Joe is crafty when cornered. I could imagine a scenario where Joe attempts to turn the tables, maybe even stalking Red or someone Red cares about. But let me be real, Red has survived far worse. One way or another, Joe would find himself outmatched and outwitted. Joe Goldberg's future would either be spending life behind bars or becoming a name on Reddington's blacklist of dearly departed. Will Graham, the FBI profiler from Hannibal, is the next person I'm putting up against Joe. Will has a unique ability to think like serial killers. He's the guy who will walk into a crime scene and mentally reconstruct it. Will has also faced one of fiction's craftiest killers of all time, Hannibal Lecter, and lived to tell the tale. But the problem with Will is that he never wants to catch a killer for justice's sake. He just wants to hunt. In other words, a predator is lurking in Will too, which makes him both effective and vulnerable. Will's mind would dive straight into Joe's twisted psyche. He would profile Joe as an obsessive lover who eliminates anyone who threatens his fantasy life. We could easily see Will identifying Joe as the killer before anyone else, much like he did Hannibal. However, actually catching Joe is another story. Will tends to get emotionally entangled with the killers he pursues. Just look at his twisted bond with Hannibal. And if Joe senses Will's empathy, he might manipulate it, possibly befriending Will or faking remorse to exploit Will's compassion. There's also the risk that Will's own dark impulses might surface against Joe, and Will might contemplate doing something unorthodox. He did consider killing Hannibal at one point after all. He might even confront Joe. This might backfire, allowing Joe to escape or even overpower Will if Will is in one of his emotionally conflicted states. He is also psychologically fragile and often manipulated by severe killers. Hannibal practically gaslit him into a mental hospital. He would likely figure Joe out completely, but due to lack of hard proof or Will's psyche betraying him, Joe would find a way to slip through Will's fingers. The next detective is Jim Hopper. Hopper is the lovable chief of police from Stranger Things. He's a small-town cop with a big city past. Hopper's approach to Joe would be old-school police work mixed with gut feeling. Hopper's the guy who will punch first and ask questions later. He is fearless but not exactly subtle, nor does he have access to high tech. Against a guy like Joe, Hopper's instinct would scream that Joe is guilty, yet Hopper will struggle to get hard proof. Perhaps Hawkins' limited resources would hamper the case. It's usually just him and a couple of deputies. Another angle is that Hopper's notorious temper could scare Joe off before he can even trap him. Hopper would strongly suspect Joe, but he won't be able to prove it. More likely, Joe would find a way out, maybe framing someone else in Hawkins or faking his own death. In the end, Hop would be that detective who knows who the bad guy is but can't lock him up due to technicalities. He would probably warn everyone around about Joe and keep a shotgun handy, but Joe would slip out of Hawkins before Hopper can slam the door on him. The next detective would be from anime, L from Death Note. Nobody can deny that L from Death Note is a genius. He took on Kira and won even though Kira had the Death Note. Joe Goldberg would be easy for him. If L were tasked with catching Joe Goldberg, it would be a very short game of cat and mouse, and we all know who the mouse would be. L excels at pattern recognition. He would quickly notice Joe's MO. Young women in Joe's orbit die or disappear then convenient scapegoats take the fall and Joe always lands on his feet with a new identity. Joe is smart, but he is not that smart. Earl would likely set a trap for Joe to fall into. He would surveil Joe just like he did with Light Yagami and wait for him to incriminate himself. Joe's advantage is operating in a world with average detectives, but introduce someone like Earl and it's game over. Joe only thrives because everyone around him is oblivious and Earl never overlooks the obvious clues. Earl will have Joe behind bars by the end of season 1. On to the next detective, Chloe Decker, the LAPD homicide detective from Lucifer. On the surface, Chloe has what it takes to investigate Joe. She's persistent and by the book, which means she will likely go through proper procedures, obtain warrants, surveil Joe legally, interview witnesses, etc., etc. If Lucifer is by her side, his supernatural ability to draw out people's desire could actually expose Joe. But let's consider Chloe on her own though, since Lucifer's help is a huge wildcard. Without Lucifer's assistance, Chloe might find Joe puzzling. Joe has no criminal record that stands out and he is pretty good at pretending to be normal. Chloe might become suspicious of Joe, maybe because he is connected to a victim or his alibi has holes. She would pursue him as a person of interest. The reason Chloe ranks in tier 5 is that she tends to trust the process and the people around her to a fault. In Lucifer, she never suspected her own partner was literally Satan for a long time, same way she might not immediately imagine that the bookstore manager Joe is a calculated murderer. Joe could exploit this by cozying up to Chloe. Chloe is empathetic and sometimes lets her guard down with people she feels sorry for. Joe can also be very charming when he wants to be. He might spin a sub-story about his tragic past to gain Chloe's sympathy and in the process deflect her suspicions. Chloe also plays by the rules. She won't break into this place without cause or beat a confession out of him. That gives Joe time, and Joe with time is very dangerous. If Joe senses Chloe is onto him, he will likely target her as his next victim. If she's not careful, she might find herself in Joe's cage, with Joe rationalizing to her about why he had to do it. Next on the list is Captain Olivia Benson from Law and Order SVU. Benson has seen every depravity and helped countless victims. If Joe Goldberg's crimes intersected with SVU, Benson would be on it like a hawk. Initially, Joe might not trigger suspicion because he is polite and appears caring, but Olivia has seen many perpetrators who seemed like nice guys. She will likely pick up on inconsistencies in Joe's witness statements or behavior. Benson also tends to grill those closest to the victim the most. The boyfriend is always a suspect. That's her rule 101. I can imagine in season 1, SVU is called when Beck is found dead. Benson interviews Joe and something about him is off. Maybe he is too controlled or his story about last seeing Beck has some contradictions. Olivia's intuition will ping. She might not even have evidence to hold him immediately, but she would keep him on her radar. Over time, as small odd cases pop up like Peach's suspicious suicide or Candace getting missing, Benson would start linking them. She would have a squad digging up Joe's digital footprints and interviewing past acquaintances. Eventually, she would catch him, though Joe might slip away a couple of times at first. SVU sometimes has criminals escape or gets off on technicalities in the first round only to nail them later. So I'm going to put her in tier 2. With that, I have come to the end of this ranking video. Which other detectives do you think should be added to the ranking? Leave your thoughts in the comments. On to the next one. Stay cool, stay fresh, keep living the good life.